Hello, and welcome to Office Hours with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan. Today's question is, I have a class that has a group project. What can I do to make sure it goes well? And an underlying question to the question that was asked is, why do professors assign group projects? My grade should be based solely on the work that I do. And the reason professors assign group projects is because there are very few jobs that don't require some degree of teamwork. Some it's rare, but it's out there, and others is you're working in teams all the time, maybe more than one at the same time because you may be working on different projects. So it's incumbent upon us to get you into that mindset of working in groups. And then also there are accreditation agencies that require group projects to accredit the program, specifically in civil engineering, ABET, which is the group that accredits civil engineering programs and most engineering programs. They require group projects. So that's why we make you do it. I mean, a lot of us didn't like to do it when we were in school, and working in groups can be a pain, but it's something that you're not going to be able to get away from. So one of the things is, how are your teams assigned in the class? Does the professor assign them, or do you get to pick your group members? So if you get to pick, don't team up with your friends if your friends are either A, lazy, or B, perfectionists. So you've got kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum. Lazy people tend to not get their work done. Perfectionists tend to overthink things and create much more work than is needed. If you're the perfectionist, stop doing that. That's just going to hurt you in the long run. I mean, you don't turn out crap. But the phrase, it's good enough, is there for a reason. Getting to a quote-unquote perfect place is really an unattainable goal, because as soon as that project leaves your hands, it's going off to someone else who may look at things differently, and what you spent all this extra time doing, they may say, oh, well, we didn't need that, or here's how we're going to do it. And if that person's the boss, then all that work was for nothing. So if you're picking the team, you want to try to pick people who have strengths in the various areas of the project. So research, writing, presenting, programming, or building. If you have to build a physical model, you want someone that's handy. If you have to do a computer program as part of the project, you want someone that knows how to program a computer. So you try to get people who have these strengths, and those are the areas that they're going to work in. If the professor assigns the group, or it's just at random drawing names from a hat, then you really have to deal with what you got. And the exception to that is if there's just someone in your group that you just cannot work with. For example, if your ex is assigned to the same group, then you need to go to your professor very early on, like immediately, and explain, well, look, this isn't going to work out because of these reasons. And most professors that I know, if it's a valid reason, are going to say, hey, all right, we'll swap this out, because they don't want to deal with the drama. Now, if it's a project that the whole class is in the group, like when I taught senior design, it was the whole class, whether that was 5 people in a class or 20 people in a class, they were all part of the project. So in that case, you're just going to have to get over it and deal with it. Because if it's the whole class, then everyone's going to be in there together. And regardless of how the group is formed, whether you pick or the group members are assigned, don't be afraid to call out people who aren't pulling their weight, especially early on. If someone's not doing their work, or they're turning things in late, or they are turning in crap, you need to call them out, whether it's you as yourself, or the project manager, or the rest of the class, so that that person knows that they are expected to perform. They're not going to get a free ride. And again, before you call that person out, check with the rest of the group to make sure that they're on the same page with you, that they agree, yeah, so-and-so's not doing their work, or they're turning in crap, we need to buckle down on this, so that it's everybody going. And maybe it's, oh, well, we're ganging up on the person. Well, that's a group. If someone's not pulling their weight, then they need to be ganged up on and told that their behavior is not acceptable. It's not easy to do, but that's something that you may end up having to do in the real world And like I say, group projects are a good practice for the teamwork you're going to have to do in the real world. Now, outside the academic setting, there are these things called bosses who can come in and put the hammer down on someone who's not doing their work, because if the group performs poorly in that project, that reflects badly on the boss, and that's going to make the boss look bad to his or her superior. So they have a vested interest in making sure the project goes well. And as far as someone not doing their work, there's nothing your professor can do if you come to them the day of or the day before the final presentation or project is due and say, oh, well, we can't turn it in because so-and-so hasn't been doing their work. Well, if so-and-so hasn't been doing their work, then the professor needed to hear about that a lot sooner, not just the day before it is. You know, the presentation's due or the final paper's due or whatever is due. So don't come in a week or two before everything's supposed to be turned in and go to your professor and say, oh, well, we need more time because so-and-so's not doing their work, or you need to make so-and-so do their work. It's really the group's responsibility to make sure things get taken care of early on. If someone's being a problem, you need to bring that to the professor's attention very quickly. And if there's not a procedure to remove a non-performing group member in the syllabus at the beginning of class, if you're looking through the class syllabus and they say, oh, we've got a group project and here's some guidelines for the group project, if there's nothing in there that tells how a non-performing member can be removed from the group, then bring that up with the professor so that they can add that in there, because there really needs to be a formal procedure of removing a group member if they're not doing their work, if they're not contributing, if they're just trying to coast. And that procedure is going to have to adhere to whatever university policies are in place. Make sure everyone has everyone else's contact information, email, cell phone, however they can get a hold of the other group members in case that needs to happen. Make sure you know exactly what is expected of you and when those expectations are due. And by that I mean the deliverables. Do you have to do a formal report? Is it a computer program? Is it a presentation? What are you going to be graded on? What is the final thing or things that you have to produce from the group project? Is it, like I say, is it a report? Is it a model, a physical model that shows how the land is going to be developed, a computer program, oral presentation? And you may have multiple things. For senior design, they had to have a written report, they had to have a set of plans, and they had to make an oral presentation. So know exactly what you have to turn in and when those things are due. Elect a project manager. There needs to be someone that is quote-unquote in charge of the group. So there's one person that's going to the professor to get answers to questions. So elect a project manager, and that project manager is going to act as the clearinghouse for the information. They're going to run whatever meetings you have. But that project manager should also be expected to contribute to the actual work. If there's research or writing or calculations to do, the project manager should also be involved in that. Unless it's just such a huge project with a large number of people that there really isn't an effective or efficient way for the project manager to be involved and still keep up with his or her other duties. Assign people specific tasks with specific completion dates. All right, everyone in the group needs to know, here is what you are responsible for, here is when the various things need to be turned in, because some people's work is going to need to be done earlier so that that information can be passed on to the other people to go. So if someone's doing research, then the results of that research need to be done by a specific time, so the person who's actually doing the writing or putting the presentation together will have that information to work with. So you need to come up with a chart, some kind of PERT chart or Gantt chart, which is basically just, here's the steps that we have to take to get from the beginning to the end, here's how long we think they're going to take, so here are the completion dates. And that needs to be done very early on so that everyone's on the same page and they're not going off all helter-skelter and doing things and wasting time. And schedule a specific date and time and place for required group meetings. And I stress required. If there are times that everyone needs to be there so that information can be exchanged quickly, and whether you do that once a week or every other week or once a month, again, it depends on the complexity of the project. And your meetings need to be very focused and have a purpose, so that it's not just everyone's getting together and just talking around the table. I mean, if you're doing brainstorming, that's one thing, but they need to be specific and focused and as short as possible, and they shouldn't devolve into just big social gathering that's wasting time. So a meeting should have an agenda. That's project manager's job to put an agenda together, to get it out to everyone so that everyone knows here's what we're going to discuss, so that people know, oh, I need to be ready to talk about this specific point, so that everyone else will be able to go on with their work if they're waiting on me. And probably the biggest thing to say is don't wait till towards the end of the semester to get the project started. The closer you get to the end of the semester, the more things you're due. You're going to have term papers, you're going to have final exams. If this is a senior design project, if this is in the last semester before you graduate, senioritis is going to hit. The closer you get to the end of the semester, the less people are going to want to work. They're going to have their job offers. They're going to be worried about whether they're going to grad school. They're going to be ready to get out. So get going as soon as you can. And if you get finished with your project a month before school is out, great. You're done. Let it sit. Don't try to keep tinkering with it. So if you get done early, great. I realize most folks aren't going to do that. The times that I taught senior design, the day of the presentation, they're still making changes to the report and the blueprints and all that. And that really goes on in the outside world too. If you're making a presentation to a client, you're tinkering with it right up until you're given the presentation. But if you can get finished early, great. And to help get finished early, set some specific formatting guidelines early on in the project. By formatting, I mean what word processing program are you going to use? What font are you going to use? How are you going to handle margins and figures and captions? And that just makes it easier. So if people are writing different parts of the report, when it gets all combined into the final product, it looks uniform. You don't want to have a bunch of different fonts. You don't want to have a bunch of different margin settings. If I'm someone going through and reading that's going to be very jarring. That's going to detract from it. So you need to be consistent. Right. Establish an online file sharing account to make information transfer easier. So something online that everyone in the group has access to, so that's where everyone can send all of their things, so that they're not emailing everything out to everyone. It's all in one place. People can go in there. And establish guidelines of who can change the quote-unquote master document. If you have a copy of the final report in there, who can make changes to that final report? All right, so because if everyone can make changes to it, that's not a good idea, because then you're not going to know what got done when, or if something got done. So that's really the project manager who should bird dog that and make sure there are limited people who can make that change. Keep backups of everything that's on that file sharing program someplace else. Thumb drive, hard drive, make sure a couple people have that, because if something happens to the servers for that online storage device, storage service, it's going to be like right before your final presentation's due, and if everything is up there and you have no backups, that's not a good thing. When it comes time to practice for your presentation, if you have to give a presentation as part of the group project, practice as close in conditions that are as close to the actual presentation as you're going to do. I mean, practice in the same room, use the same equipment, dress the same way that you're going to dress for the final presentation. Have some other people sit in the room that aren't part of the group and give feedback if you want to videotape that. So how much of this you do is, if you go as far as videotaping, it depends. Well, how much of the course grade is dependent on the group project and the presentation, and how many hours is the project. So you're not going to spend tens and hundreds of hours on something that's for a 1-credit class, or if the group project and presentation counts for 10% of your final grade, you don't want to turn out garbage, but there's some limit of what time you're going to put into that, as opposed to if it's a 3-credit hour class and it's all based on the group project, the written report, the presentation, the deliverables. So then you're going to have to spend a lot more time on it. How have others handled this project in the past? I know for senior design, when the seniors were giving their presentation, members of the junior class would sit in on that presentation so they could see, well, we're going to be in their position a year from now. How are they doing things? What went well? What worked? What didn't work? So that they're ready. So if you're in a class or your year group and next year or next semester I'm going to have to take this class, it has the group project. If there's a presentation that you can go to, if it's open to the public or open to other students, go watch that presentation. Maybe it's an hour and a half out of your day, but then you're going to be prepared for when it comes your turn to do the presentation for that same class. And I've already touched on a little bit of the amount of effort you're going to put into the project depends on how much of your grade, your final grade, is dependent on that group project, and how many credit hours is that class. Another thing is, make sure you as an individual can point to, here are the specific things that I did for this group project. Because sometimes professors will say, well, there's going to be a grade that the entire group is going to get, but then the final grade there's going to be individual contribution. So maybe they'll have everyone in the group fill out an evaluation of, here's how so-and-so did as far as what the other group members are concerned. Or maybe the professor will want you to turn in, here's the specific things that I did for the group project. Here's the calculations I did, here's the research I did, here's the chapter of the report that I wrote, here are the slides that I developed for the presentation. So be able to document everything that you did, everything that you contributed to that group project. And just to summarize, the key thing, start early, know what you have to produce, what your deliverables are, when they're due, and don't let group members coast. Make sure everyone is contributing to the project. So hopefully this helped. Take care, and I'll see you next time.